When I first laid eyes on the lakefront property, I thought I'd found the perfect retreat. It was quiet, serene, and tucked away from the noise of city life, exactly what I needed after years of grinding through a high-pressure corporate career. The house itself wasn't massive, just a two-story cabin-style home with wide windows that looked out over the sparkling blue lake. But what sealed the deal for me wasn't the house. It was the private dock. I imagined my mornings sitting on that dock, coffee in hand, the sun just beginning to rise, and the water calm enough to reflect the sky like a mirror. No more endless traffic, no more blaring horns. Just peace. So, I signed the papers, and 2 weeks later, I was driving down the narrow, tree-lined road that wound through the neighborhood, my truck loaded with boxes and my kayak strapped to the roof. Everything seemed perfect, for the first 2 hours. The knock on the door wasn't a polite tap. It was loud, sharp, and demanding, the kind of knock you hear from someone convinced you owe them money. I opened the door, expecting maybe a delivery guy or even a curious neighbor welcoming me. Instead, there they were, a group of at least 8 people standing on my porch, all with the same expression of judgment and entitlement. At the center of them was her. She didn't introduce herself. She didn't even smile. She stood there, chin tilted up, clutching a clipboard like she was about to conduct an inspection. She looked like the embodiment of every HOA Karen story I'd ever read online. Late 50s, perfectly styled bob haircut, pastel pink cardigan tied neatly over her shoulders, and a scowl sharp enough to cut glass. "You're trespassing," she said, her voice sharp and clipped, like she'd rehearsed a line. I blinked, confused. "Excuse me, this property," she said, gesturing broadly toward the water and then the dock, "is under the jurisdiction of the Lakeview HOA. You can't just move in here without checking in with us first. And that dock," she pointed to it like it was some kind of contraband, "is not yours to use unless you pay association fees and sign our agreement." I leaned against the doorframe, trying to keep my voice calm. "I bought this house, and according to the deed, the dock comes with it. So, yeah, it's mine." The group behind her exchanged smug looks, as if they knew something I didn't. She smirked. "Oh, honey, you bought the house, sure. But the lake, the docks, the water, they all fall under HOA jurisdiction. You'll need to sign our paperwork and pay your dues if you want to keep using our amenities." I almost laughed. "Your amenities? Lady, I just paid good money for this property. The dock is on my land. You don't own it." Her smile tightened into something that was more of a threat than a grin. "If you don't comply, we will fine you. And if you think we're bluffing, ask the previous owners how well that worked out for them. Around here, we enforce the rules." The group muttered in agreement, their little chorus of judgment hanging heavy in the air. "I'm not signing anything," I said flatly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have unpacking to do." I shut the door, maybe a little harder than necessary, and locked it. When I went outside a few minutes later to grab another box from my truck, there was a bright orange slip taped to my mailbox, "Notice of violation." That was when it hit me, these people had no idea who they were dealing with. I wasn't just some city guy looking for a vacation home. When I'd bought the property, I'd gone through every page of the deed, every line of legal documentation. And in doing so, I'd discovered something none of them seemed to know: my property included riparian rights to the lake itself. Which meant that the water surrounding the entire neighborhood, every dock, every buoy, every boat that touched that water, was technically under my ownership. I didn't plan to use that information against anyone. I wasn't looking for a fight. All I wanted was peace and quiet. But the way these people barged in, treating me like I was some sort of intruder on my own land, flipped a switch in me I hadn't felt in years, the same switch I'd flipped in boardrooms when someone tried to undermine me. The next few days were tense. Every time I stepped outside, I could feel eyes on me from behind curtains or over manicured hedges. Someone started leaving HOA newsletters in my mailbox, along with notes written in passive-aggressive cursive reminding me of the rules. One neighbor even walked right up my driveway and started lecturing me about trash can placement, as if I'd been living there for years instead of a few days. By the 4th day, the whispers started. I'd catch bits of conversation when I walked past groups on the sidewalk, "Won't last long, already causing trouble, probably doesn't even understand how this community works." But the breaking point came at the community clubhouse. I hadn't been invited to the meeting, of course, but I went anyway. When I walked through the double doors, the room went silent. Every eye turned toward me, the outsider, the troublemaker. At the front of the room stood the same woman from that first day, her clipboard now accompanied by a stack of papers that she waved around like evidence in a courtroom. She was in full swing, her voice dripping with contempt as she ranted about new residents who think they're above the rules and outsiders who don't respect our traditions. I waited until she finished before stepping forward. Calm, collected, every movement deliberate. I set a thick folder down on the table in front of her. The room went dead silent. "This," I said, my voice steady but cold, "is my deed. And according to these documents, I don't just own the house and the dock. I own the rights to the water surrounding this neighborhood. Every dock here, every boat, every piece of equipment floating on that lake, it's on my property. Legally. Gasps and whispers filled the room. A few people looked at each other in confusion. The HOA queen herself blinked, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "You're bluffing," she spat, though her voice wavered. I smiled. "Check the county records. You'll find my name on every square foot of this lake." The room erupted into chaos, whispers, murmurs, frantic flipping of papers. But I didn't stick around to argue. I turned and walked out, the weight of the situation settling over them like a storm cloud. As I stepped onto my dock later that evening, the sun dipping below the horizon and casting streaks of gold across the water, I couldn't help but smile. They thought they could intimidate me. They thought they could control me. But they didn't know they'd picked a fight with the man who owned the water beneath their feet. The morning after the HOA meeting was almost comical. I woke up to the sound of chaos outside, frantic voices, phones ringing, and even a drone buzzing low over the lake. When I stepped outside with my coffee, the usual calm waters were filled with panicked residents leaning over their docks, gesturing and shouting to one another. A couple of their boats were already pulled up on shore, as though someone feared I might have their engines impounded overnight. I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the rich bitterness, and let my gaze sweep across the lake. The docks, the boats, the floating rafts, every inch of it sat on what, legally, was my water. It wasn't about vengeance. Not yet. But if these people wanted to treat me like an intruder, then fine, I'd remind them who really controlled their precious little paradise. Around noon, there was another knock at my door. Softer this time, hesitant. When I opened it, I found a man in his early 60s, khakis, polo shirt tucked neatly in, sunglasses perched on his head. He had the look of someone sent as a peace offering. "Hi," he said, clearing his throat. "Name's Doug. I'm, on the HOA board. We just wanted to talk." "Talk," I echoed, raising a brow. "Funny. Last time we talked, your president accused me of trespassing on my own property." Doug chuckled nervously. "Yeah, about that, there's been some misunderstanding. Karen can be intense. Look, we just want to figure out a way to, make this work. No one wants bad blood in the neighborhood." I leaned against the doorframe, studying him. He wasn't hostile like the others. Just nervous. But I'd learned long ago that being polite didn't always mean being honest. "Doug," I said evenly, "the way I see it, I own this lake. That means I don't need the HOA's permission for anything. But you've got docks, boats, and even a few floating decks anchored on my water. Technically, that makes you tenants. And tenants pay rent." His face paled. "Rent." I smiled. "Rent." By that evening, word had spread like wildfire. The whispers were no longer subtle, they were loud, frantic conversations that carried across backyards and down the narrow streets of the neighborhood. Some people looked at me with open hostility, others with curiosity, maybe even respect. Karen, though, she was fuming. I knew she'd show up eventually, and I wasn't disappointed. The following afternoon, her shiny white SUV screeched to a stop in front of my driveway. She marched up the walkway, heels clicking against the stone, fury practically radiating off her. "You can't do this," she hissed before I even opened the door fully. "You can't just claim the lake like it's your personal pool." I tilted my head, feigning confusion. "Karen, I'm not claiming anything. I own it. There's a difference. This community has been here for over 20 years, she snapped, cheeks flushed. "We have rules, agreements, traditions. You think you can just waltz in and correct a mistake?" I interrupted. "Yeah, actually, I can. The previous owners didn't enforce their rights. I'm not them." Her hands trembled as she jabbed a manicured finger toward me. "You listen to me. You will not disrupt this community. We will fight you on this. We'll take you to court if we have to." I leaned closer, my voice low and calm, the way I used to speak to opposing counsel back in my corporate days. "By all means, take me to court. But when you do, the judge is going to ask for the property records. And when those records show I own the water, every single one of you will owe me back fees for years of unauthorized use. Are you prepared for that bill, Karen?" For the first time, she faltered. The confident, self-appointed queen of the HOA didn't have a snappy comeback. She turned on her heel and stormed off, muttering under her breath as she stomped back to her SUV. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The following week, they escalated. It started small, anonymous complaints to the county about construction noise that didn't exist, or mysterious trash piles that appeared on my property overnight. Then came the letters, thick envelopes stuffed with threats of legal action, all signed by the HOA board. I didn't flinch. Instead, I hired a surveyor and a lawyer. Within a few days, I had official documents drafted up, contracts, essentially, offering each homeowner a simple deal: pay a modest annual fee for continued access to the lake and their docks, or remove their property from my water immediately. When the letters went out, the neighborhood erupted. Some were furious, others confused, but a surprising number actually came to me quietly, apologizing for the hostility and agreeing to sign. The real fireworks came at the emergency HOA meeting 2 weeks later. The clubhouse was packed, the tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Karen stood at the front, her voice sharp as she rallied the room against me, painting me as the villain threatening to steal their lifestyle. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I didn't start this, I said calmly, my eyes sweeping the room. I moved here to enjoy some peace and quiet. You barged onto my property, accused me of trespassing, and threatened me. But here's the truth, legally, the lake is mine. You can hate that all you want, but you can't change it. So here are your options: sign the agreements, pay a small annual fee, and keep living exactly as you have been, or don't. But if you choose not to, those docks and boats will be removed within 30 days. Your choice. The room buzzed with murmurs, and I watched as the reality sank in. For the first time, they realized they weren't the ones holding the power anymore. By the next morning, more than half the homeowners had signed the agreements. Even Doug, who showed up with coffee as a peace offering, muttered something about Karen going too far this time. Karen, however, refused to budge. She doubled down, filing complaints, screaming on neighborhood forums, and even trying to rally a boycott. But her influence was crumbling, and everyone could see it. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I sat out on my dock, the water calm and still. From across the lake, I could hear the sounds of kids laughing, splashing in the shallows, and neighbors chatting as if nothing had ever happened. It wasn't about winning, not really. It was about balance, about reminding people that respect goes both ways. And as I watched the last rays of light dance across the water that I now fully controlled, I couldn't help but think they'd never look at the lake, or me, the same way again.